students, so this is our second day, and as you can see, we have some changes in our two models. So on this first one, you guys are going to be able to see that the water level has decreased. And in our other one, the water level hasn't decreased, but we're getting some condensation on the top of our experiment. So I ran into an error when I was letting Sam out. Sam knocked the table. So you guys can see that this particular container number 1, the lake kind of ran together with the rocks because he knocked the table on his way out. So that's going to affect our observations. So let's go ahead and measure our lake levels. All right, we're still at 2 inches for container 2. And container 1 is 1.6 inches. There is no condensation on container 1's lid, but there is some on container 2's. And the soil in this one looks very wet, but I think that was due to my error. And then the soil in this one just looks moist to me, like it was when we left it. So now we're going to see what happens after another 24 hours. And so here we are on the 3rd day. So we're going to start with our container 1 that does not have a top on it. And it looks like our water level has decreased quite a bit. Let's see how much. We are now down to 1.3 inches on our lake. And if you guys can see over here, the water level has not decreased as much, or if at all. Let's see. Nope, we're still at 2 inches. So I don't know if you guys can see from here, there'll be a picture, but there's lots of condensation. It's almost like it's raining within our terrarium. So we're able to say that there is condensation on this lid, but again, we don't even have a lid over here, so there is no condensation. And finally, when we're looking at the soil, it's hard for me to tell with this one because of our error, but I can definitely tell that the soil over here in our container that's almost working like a little water cycle, that the soil is moist. So now we've done all of our observations. So you're going to need to go through your data analysis and your So if you can't get your supplies, we're going to be looking at the virtual lab version. So you're going to go into the directions to look here. It gives you all of the instructions, and it also gives you your procedure. So it shows you on day 1 the measurement. So it'll already give you your measurement so you can fill it in for the lake level. And then here's your measurement for the second container. And you're able to do the other observations as well. So is there condensation on the lid? Notice that 2 doesn't have a lid where 1 does. And then the soil, what does it look like? So here we are on day 2. You're going to have to pay close attention to the top to make sure that you're on the right part of your lab report. So notice container 1, we're starting to get some condensation. That's why the streaks are rolling down the side. We are still at 6.4 though. And then you guys can make a determination on the soil. The second one, we noticed that the water level has decreased to 5.2. Again, we're not seeing any condensation, and there is no lid. Don't forget to make a determination with the soil. And when you guys are comparing the soils, you obviously cannot feel or touch it. So I would just compare the soil from 1 to the soil to 2. Okay, we made it all the way to day 3 now. So you guys are going to see that the water level is still the same at 6.4. We're still getting the streaks and the condensation, and the soil looks like it is quite wet. Okay, and now we're on the last day. So we are down to 5 centimeters in container 2, and it definitely looks drier over here comparatively. So this is going to be a quick way for anyone that either can't get the materials or just wants to be able to do the lab in one day. So we have gone through all of our 3 days. So it's going to be important that we look at the data analysis and the conclusion because they're worth a lot of points. So we want to look at the water level. Evaporation is what happens before condensation. So how that water got up to the top of our lid. So again, how did that condensation get there? And then how is the soil different? So when we get to the conclusion, it's going to be important that we describe our independent or our test variable. And then you have to tell me whether or not your hypothesis was supported by your results. So did what you predicted happen, or did it not? And why? If you were to repeat the experiment or do it the first time, because maybe you used the virtual lab, what would you change? And then based on the independent variable, explain how this is like something in the real world. So it's going to be important that we get this question. And then you're going to have to list the 5 spheres of the Earth. And all you need to do is go back up to Talk Like a Scientist if you've forgotten them. And then you have to figure out if they were represented in your terrarium. You guys are probably not going to be able to fit the cryosphere in your terrarium unless you randomly put an ice cube in there. So it's okay if you don't have the cryosphere. You still should list it, but you should say that it was not represented in your model. So here is our grading rubric. So it's going to be really important that our hypothesis has an if-then statement. So it's going to be if independent variable, then dependent variable. If independent variable is the thing that I changed as the scientist, and then our dependent variable is what we were measuring. So with the procedure, in order to get all of your points, you're going to have to list all of your materials. You're going to have to write a summary of how the lab was performed. You're going to have to explain any errors that you encountered. So my error was Sam hitting the table. And then you're going to have to be able to identify the independent and the dependent variable. So the next portion of the rubric is going to make sure that you are accurately looking at the independent and the dependent variable. So if you guys look there, that independent and dependent variable actually showed up in the hypothesis, the procedure, and the variable section. So it's worth a lot more than you think it is if you don't identify the independent and dependent variables. So when we look at our data, it's important that it's accurate. And if you do them for both, if it's accurate and you forget one of the containers, you're going to lose some points. And if you didn't do anything, then you are going to lose even more points. So those conclusion questions at the end, those are going to be really important that you go through them. If you do not formulate accurate conclusions, if you do not make real life connections, and if you don't use complete sentences, you're going to lose some points here. And here is the largest category that you can get points in. So it's going to be important that you go through all of your conclusion questions.